the Invisible Man. In a quaint, peaceful village in England, the arrival of an unusual guest at the local inn marked the beginning of an extraordinary tale. It was a cold winter evening, and the village was covered in a blanket of snow. The inn, run by Mr. and Mrs. Hall, had always been a place of comfort for travelers seeking refuge from the harsh weather. On this particular evening, the innkeeper and his wife were taken aback by the arrival of a peculiar guest. A man walked in, entirely wrapped in bandages from head to toe, with only his eyes visible through dark glasses. He wore a large, wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face, making his appearance even more mysterious. His arrival caused a stir among the locals, who were curious about the stranger's odd appearance. Despite the unusual sight, the stranger, who introduced himself as Griffin, paid for his stay in advance with a large sum of money. His manner was brusque and distant, and he preferred to remain alone in his room. He would only venture out for short periods, wrapped in his bandages and always wearing his hat and glasses. Mr. and Mrs. Hall, though intrigued, respected his privacy and did not pry into his affairs. Griffin's presence in the village was anything but ordinary. He was, in fact, a brilliant scientist with a secret that would soon cause much fear and confusion. Griffin had been working on an ambitious experiment for years, seeking to discover a way to make objects, or people, invisible. After many trials and errors, he finally succeeded. The problem was Griffin had tested the invisibility formula on himself, and the results were both astonishing and troubling. Initially, Griffin was thrilled with his discovery. He imagined the endless possibilities. He could achieve great things, become famous, or even help people. However, as days turned into weeks, Griffin soon realized that being invisible came with its own set of problems. The practical difficulties of living an invisible life began to weigh heavily on him. Simple tasks, such as eating or dressing, became challenging. Even more troubling was the loneliness and isolation that came with his invisibility. Griffin found himself cut off from the world, and the power that once seemed so promising began to feel like a prison. The strain of living an invisible life started to affect Griffin's mind. He grew increasingly frustrated and angry. He could no longer enjoy the simple pleasures of life, and the realization that he was forever cut off from the world began to drive him mad. The Invisible Man became obsessed with the idea of using his power to control and dominate. His initial hopes of using his discovery for good turned into a desire to use it for personal gain and revenge. As his frustration mounted, Griffin began to commit crimes. He robbed houses, stole money, and created chaos in the village. His invisible presence made it difficult for anyone to track him down or stop him. The village soon became a place of fear and uncertainty. People spoke in hushed tones about strange happenings, furniture moving on its own, objects being stolen without a trace, and eerie sounds at night. The local police were baffled by the strange occurrences. They could find no evidence or clues to explain the mysterious crimes. The villagers were terrified and began to panic. They whispered about a ghostly figure that seemed to be haunting them. The fear grew, and the once peaceful village was now on edge. Griffin's criminal activities became more brazen. He started to see himself as a powerful figure, untouchable and above the law. He began to act with increasing violence and cruelty. His aim was to instill fear and assert his dominance over the people. Griffin's madness reached new heights as he plotted to reveal himself to the world in a dramatic fashion, believing that his invisibility would give him ultimate power. One night, Griffin decided it was time to make a grand statement. He planned to make his presence known and demand that everyone bow to his will. The village was thrown into chaos as Griffin's reign of terror continued. The police and the villagers, desperate to stop the invisible menace, began to work together to devise a plan to capture him. Despite the fear and uncertainty, the villagers did not give up. They started to gather information and observe patterns in the strange events. They realized that Griffin's invisibility did not make him invincible. There were moments when he was forced to interact with the visible world, like when he needed food or when he had to use certain items. These moments provided clues to his whereabouts. The turning point came when a group of brave villagers, led by the local constable, decided to confront Griffin. They laid a trap, using their knowledge of his habits and weaknesses. In a tense and dramatic encounter, they managed to outwit Griffin. They used their wits and teamwork to catch him, despite his invisible state. The confrontation was intense. Griffin, caught off guard and overwhelmed, was finally revealed. The villagers, with the help of the police, managed to subdue him. The once feared invisible man was now vulnerable and powerless. The village, though shaken, began to recover from the terror that had plagued it. Griffin's capture marked the end of his reign of terror. His story became a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of seeking power without considering the consequences. His downfall served as a stark reminder of how ambition and the desire for control can lead to one's destruction. The village slowly returned to normal life, but the memory of Griffin's terror remained. The tale of the invisible man became a legend, a story told to remind people of the importance of responsibility and the potential consequences of tampering with forces beyond human control. Griffin's story was not just a thrilling account of a man who became invisible, but also a lesson about the ethical limits of scientific experimentation and the cost of unchecked ambition. And so, the story of the invisible man lived on, not only as a chilling reminder of the past, but also as a lesson for future generations. It was a story of a man who sought greatness but lost his way, consumed by his own creation, and ultimately paid the price for his hubris.